Definitely going to need some coffee today. So I am a member of a local guild here in my area. Was very honored this year they asked me to design our guild project, which will be shown all together at an upcoming miniature show that is happening in just a couple weeks. By the time you're seeing this video, it will have been in the past. So here is the project I designed. It's just like a little cubby or like a little nook with a small vanity on the inside. And guess who is the only person who has not finished her project? Yeah, that is me, the designer of the project. So I need to do that today, all in today. So I am going to be doing a one-day challenge to try and see if I can finish this project in one day. Thankfully, I have a few advantages, one of them being I've already built the project because I had to show them what the project was. The room is built and the vanity is built, so that is good. I also have an idea. Having an idea is sometimes half the battle. It is going to be a spider looking in the vanity, getting ready for a date. And I have the spider. I have been needle felting the spider as I've been relaxing at night because it's something I can do away from my desk because there's no glue and there's no paint. So here is my little spider lady. And yeah, so I have things to start with. And now I just have to put it all together in a day. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think it's possible, but it may not be. I don't know. At the end of the day, I'll share with you how far I got. Now, I know one of my sayings is good miniatures take time, and that's very true. I would love to take several weeks on this to get it finished, but also sometimes group projects that you procrastinated on take one day. TM. So here we go. Let's see what I can get done in a day. I'm gonna need a couple more cups of this, I think. I went back and forth quite a bit trying to figure out what I wanted for the wallpaper, but I found this in some scrapbooking supplies that I had, and I liked the vintage look to it. It was also had this corset shape, which I thought would be really interesting, especially since I'm doing a spider, that maybe the spider might have seen the shape of the corset and thought it looked similar to a spider shape. So that's what I'm going with. I'm doing several different bits of this paper, so it does look like it's been collected over the years. Because I laser cut these rooms for my guild, I had some leftover stencils that were created when I took out the wallpaper pieces. So I could use that to make the wallpaper that goes on top of the white poster board. I wanted to cover up the edges before I started pasting everything in, because if it wasn't exactly perfect, the edges that went around the corners would kind of disguise that. I glued everything in one piece at a time and also made sure to cut out the area for the windows. I am doing this rather quickly. There are smoother, more professional ways to insert wallpaper, but I had to get a lot done in this day, so I'm just laying down some glue, evening it out with a post-it note, and then laying the wallpaper on top. This is how it's looking so far. I also wanted to wallpaper up underneath the ceiling. It's kind of a weird shape, but because the cardboard on top is one layer, I knew the shape on the top would be similar to inside. So I just folded it and then cut out a piece and glued it in place. After it's all installed, I'm going to be covering it with a layer of Mod Podge. I plan to do a very spidery finish to this paper, and doing a layer of Mod Podge will help protect it so that it just doesn't disintegrate or get ruined when I don't want it to. As you can see, it bubbles up quite a bit, but that's the thing about Mod Podge. You have to kind of trust the process. A lot of those bubbles will go away. I wanted to add a vanity stool in front of the vanity, and to do this I had to extend the floor. It's a very narrow space, and that was by design because everyone in my guild wanted something pretty small to work with. Bigger things tend to take up a lot of space, as I'm sure a lot of you know. I just needed another inch of space in order to put in this little vanity stool. So I traced the base of the room onto some cardboard, and then I added this little extension, and now I just have to create all these extension shapes out of cardboard and lay them on top of each other. Thankfully, my floor finish is going to cover up that gap, and no one will ever know that it wasn't originally part of the room. I created this vanity for my shining project, so I just cut another one, and I think it'll work perfect for in here as well. And my little spider fits on it just right. Once I got all of my extension pieces glued in place, I just had to even them out a little bit with a craft knife, as all of these were hand cut, so they weren't all exact. But now it's ready for some flooring. I'm going to be using popsicle sticks. I have quite a collection here, and at first I thought I was just going to be using the jumbo popsicle sticks so that this floor would go quickly. But then I started realizing that it was going to look just a little bit too uniform. This is supposed to be something that was put together by the spider with items found around the house, so I grabbed several more sizes and I'm going to intertwine them with each other as I go down the edge of the project. Going just around the edge first was going to give me a good idea on whether I liked the effect or not, and I really did, so I immediately decided that that's how I was going to be doing the flooring and other parts of the project as well. This turned out to be incredibly tedious and a big pain in the hand. So I started out pretty positive on this, but doing something like this all in one day, I don't advise, because cutting through the wood, cutting it to size, gluing it down, holding it in place while it glues takes up a lot of time, and at least for me, cutting all of those popsicle sticks all in one day was not a great idea. But if you're doing this over a week's time, it's not too bad. I then focused on covering up some of the exposed cardboard, so that's going to be in the windowsill. I want these to be completely open. I did include 2 windows with the kit, but for me, the window didn't really make sense for the spider. It made more sense that there would be some kind of access hole that was just looked like a window in the space. At this moment, Mr. Technology was super kind, brought me lunch, and so this was a good time for me to take a break. I just finished my lunch. I've framed out one window. I think I'm going to finish the other window, and then I'm going to move on to something else because I'm getting kind of tired of these popsicle sticks. When I first started this project, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do on the outside, and I was thinking about trying to find household items to kind of build up this little spider nook where the spider is hanging out. But I really like how the random popsicles are looking, so I might continue that across the back. I just don't want to do that right now because I don't want to spend all of my energy on that and not use any energy on the vanity and the interior parts of the project. So yeah, I'm gonna finish up the windows and then we will get to painting. And I am going to use my airbrush today. That's going to help so much with speed of getting the paint on the pieces. And I just haven't used it in a while. I'm excited to get it back out and do some more work with it. Let's see. I'm going to give you an energy level rating of where I am at right now. I'm probably at a 5 out of 10, but I did just eat. Got some carbs in my body. I'm going to get a fresh glass of tea, and I think I'm going to be good to continue on. I was still feeling pretty good at this point, but as you can see, the mess was starting to pile up. Things were starting to get stuck to me, and this is just the way it is when I craft. So if it ever looks like I have a perfectly clean craft space, it probably just means that the camera is zoomed in. I'm also going to be covering these sticks with Mod Podge. One of the main reasons for this is because I used hot glue to glue them down, and while that helps with speed, it's not a great glue to rely on over the years, and adding a layer of Mod Podge will help glue them together on the surface. The color I'm going for with the vanity is going to be a burnt orangey red, and that's because that's the same color that's on the spider, and you can also see that color in the wallpaper. So I'm mixing together some craft paint, some airbrush paint, and some paint thinner all together until it looks like I have the right consistency for paint that will go through my airbrush. In the kit I purchased with my airbrush, it had this little mixing tub thing and it connects directly to it. I've never used it before, but because I might use this paint color in other places, I only really want to mix it once. So I'm going to be keeping it in this container during the duration of the project. So I started with small circles. I'm just trying to remember what I know about airbrushing, which isn't a lot. I'm just trying to get back into the muscle memory of how do I lay down paint on these surfaces. I really do want just a smooth blank finish for this first coat of paint. This is how it's looking. I'm really happy with the color here, and yeah, so it looks really smooth. Why don't I use the airbrush more? I don't know. I just constantly torture myself with paintbrush strokes and everything. I do end up hand painting the interior parts of the mirror just because it would probably take me a little bit more time to mask off the mirror areas and use the airbrush there than it would for me to just hand paint these areas in. I want the mirrors to look like very old vintage mirrors, the one where the silver has started to crackle off the back and it looks very dark and really almost is unusable as a mirror. It won't be usable as a mirror, in fact, so I'm not really sure what our little spider's going to be looking at. I mixed together some black, white, and gray as I was doing this to make a background surface so that I could paint some silver paint over top of it. Hopefully this is what will make it look more like a mirror and have that kind of aged, mottled look to the front of it. After the silver was on, I wasn't happy with how much black it covered up. I really did want it to look aged in the corners, so I added some more of that on top of the silver. Now I'm going to be using diamond glaze to give this that mirror look, the very smooth finish that you can also get with UV resin. I just haven't purchased any more UV resin since I've started using diamond glaze. I've really enjoyed using it. So I'm using a toothpick to get it to the very corners, and then it's just going to lay on my work surface and dry while I do everything in my power not to touch it. At this point, I was getting rather tired, my back was getting very tight, so I was trying to do stretches and trying not to just go take a nap, honestly. It's about 4 in the afternoon. I have the vanity drying behind me, so I'm gonna let that dry really well before I do anything else to it. So I'm back to working on the room. I have, I think, all of the wood for the interior in place, so I'm gonna go ahead and age the inside. I still have to add some more to the outside eventually, but aging is gonna be the next step because I do want this to seem like a place that's been around for a while, and then we'll see what else happens. I am going to just take a little bit of a break. I'm going to walk around, stretch my back because my back's starting to hurt a little bit. I've got some water, might get a snack, I'm not quite sure, but we're going to continue on. I mixed up some more rusty red paint and I made this one really watery because I was hoping to just barely stain the wood floor. And as I was doing this, I was already hating it. I hated it so much and I started to get really worried if this was the right choice. So of course, I kept painting. I thought at least if I can get a first layer of red on there, maybe I could age it and then I would start to like it. But here to me, it's looking very peach and cheery. Thankfully, I was right about the aging. Adding some brown on top of the red stained wood really started to get more into the vibe that I was looking for. I wanted somewhat of a cheery room, but had all the age and grime of something that's been sitting there for a very long time. I also realized the brown was not deep enough for me. I needed some black aging as well because I have a black widow spider and she's going to stand out quite a bit if I don't have a little bit of darkness in the room itself. So here's how it was looking after I had added the red, the brown, and the black, and I'm liking it so much better at this point. Here's how the vanity looks within the space, and I really was liking it at this point. And then I made a huge mistake. I set the vanity down upright instead of laying it on its back, and that caused the mirror to drip. and nobody likes a drippy mirror. Thankfully, I saw it fairly quickly and was able to remove it and save it, but you know, I like to share my mistakes with you, and this one was a big one. I just set it down in the wrong direction. After fixing that, I decided to move on to a rug, some kind of rug. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted. I thought maybe a doily would be really cool, but I didn't have a doily. But I did have this old set of drapes that were already cut up and ruined, so I thought I could cut a little part of one out. This also goes along with the idea of the spider finding things over the years, and maybe she just found this partial portion of a drape and decided it would be a pretty rug for her space. And then I went in to age it and immediately did too much, way too much, and so I toned it back just a little bit, but thankfully when it dries it does stand out quite a bit more. But this worked out really well. I glued it in place, which are the little spots that you see, but eventually they dry clear. It is a little bit past 5, and I've got to admit my back is really starting to bother me, so I'm going to show you where I'm at and what my plan is for the rest of the day. The vanity is now dry enough that I could put it into the room. I don't know if you can see that. Let me adjust the light real quick. So here's the vanity sitting in the room, and I went ahead and put the spider in there, and I gotta admit, the spider is just covering up too much of the room, in my opinion. Just covering up the vanity. I mean, that's the whole point, that, you know, it's the spider's vanity. She can kind of do whatever she wants. But here's my other thought, is that I would just make the room as it is without the spider in there, and then maybe have the spider like hanging out on the top or something, kind of out of the way, so you can still see the room and the spider is still somewhere. I need to age the vanity as well, but I don't want to do that until it's dried overnight because I just didn't think the diamond glaze would be so gooey, as you saw in the picture. So I'm going to let that dry. And I think I'm going to spend the rest of the night working on the outside, and this is just going to be kind of a power through it type of thing, so that tomorrow, so I'm going to fail my 1-day challenge, but I feel like I got pretty far. I mean, got pretty far, I think, but this gives you a realistic view of how long things actually take me rather than seeing me do an entire giant room in 30 minutes. It really does take me quite a while. So I have found some other little miniatures. I'll show you those when the time comes to put in here on the vanity. So, but I already know I feel like I don't have the energy to mess with those. I am going to work on the outside, and that might be it for the rest of the day because I know I really don't want to do the outside. So if I can get that done tonight, then tomorrow I will have much more oomph and excitement to do the rest of it. So here we go. So for the next 3 hours, I measured and cut and glued popsicle sticks all over the roof and the exterior walls of this little tiny room. And boy, was I getting tired, my hand was hurting, and I was ready to be done several times. Stormy came to comfort me, so she was very sweet throughout the process, coming in to check on me, and yeah, she wanted me to go to bed too. But I knew if I could get through this part, that I would have a much easier time on the rest of the project. And sometimes that's just part of miniatures. You have to get through the rough and tedious things so that you can get to the fun things. By the end of it, I didn't have enough hand power to actually cut through the popsicle sticks. I would just cut them part way and then use some pliers to snap them apart wherever I had put the cut line. Once it was finished, I covered it with Mod Podge again, just like I did the floor. I did a pretty thick layer, and I'm going to allow all of this to dry overnight. But I'm so glad I got this part of the project behind me. I think that was a good decision. Now, speaking of good decisions, I don't know if I should ever do a 1-day challenge again. I don't know why I think I can do these, but it is 8:15 p.m. and I no longer had energy to speak to the camera. I just went straight to bed. I I did not work on this project the next day. In fact, I had to take a couple days for my hands to rest. So instead, I just worked on this in little pockets of time as I continued to get ready for the miniature show where this was going to be displayed. And I will talk about that more in the next video. All in all, I think I did about 1 more day's worth of work. So if I had worked on this 2 days in a row straight, it would have been about a 2-day project, but a lot of work pushed into those 2 days. Once my hand had healed from all of those popsicle sticks, I was ready to continue on with this project. The outside of the room I want to look very different from the inside. This is supposed to be like a pile of old wood or an old crate that was used by the spider to create her little vanity nook. So I want to make it look like very old wood that someone has just left for years and no one's really paying any attention to. So I started with a very dark layer of brown paint, and now I'm going over it with some watered down black paint. That's brown plus black. And then finally I went over top of everything with some gray paint. I want it to look as though at one time it was some very nice wood, but over the years the gray had taken over, it's lost all its moisture, and now it just looks like a very old wooden box. To get this effect, I just painted some gray on top of everything and then used a paper towel to spread it out and make sure it was just a very thin coat. I also made sure to go in the direction of the wood grain so that it looked pretty natural. Of course, I couldn't help myself but add a little bit more aging on top of the gray, and this was the final result. So as I mentioned, I did need to age the vanity a bit more, so I'm adding some more brown and black over everything so that it does look as aged as other parts of the project. I'm using a paper towel where I feel like it was just going to puddle to get some of that off. Now all of this is going to hopefully be covered with spider webs, so I don't want to do, it's kind of a weird balance between aging enough but not aging too much, where I still want it to be a recognizable item through the spider webs. So we'll see how that goes. After spilling some beads all over my desk, I decided to add them as handles onto the vanity. Again, I'm keeping this very simple because most of this is going to be covered, but I still can't help myself on adding some little details. While this dries, I do need to pay attention to my spider. Here's a better look at the spider that I needle felted. She is a black widow spider that I kind of personified a little bit so it would look more natural, like she's sitting in a chair. I did some research and found that a lint remover works on needle felting, and it really did. Like, you can tell the difference between these two legs. I was very impressed with the ability of this little lint remover. I've had this for years, so I'm really glad I had something that helped me with this. She's looking much less fuzzy, which is great, and I guess I'll just keep this little lint remover in my craft room from now on. One of the things I needed to add were her eyes, so I'm going to be using some sewing pins. I'm dipping the heads of the pins into some black paint, and then after that dries, I'm going to dip it into some diamond glaze, which is going to seal the paint and also give them a glossy finish. Then I'm going to let that dry completely for a while so that I know for sure it's not sticky or gooey and it's not going to mess up my needle felted creature. This is how they look once they're done. I'm going to clip off the ends of the sewing pins, and a helpful tip if you ever need to do this is to cover the sewing pin completely with a paper towel while you clip it, and then your little pointy piece won't go flying and get lost somewhere in your craft room. So then I'm left with just these little bitty stalks with the eyeball at the end. I'm using an awl to poke through the needle felted material so that I could push it into place and have an eyeball. So I learned this with a felting kit I did on one of my live streams, and it's been a pretty easy way to add eyes to needle felted creatures. I'm trying to get 8 eyes in there. I think I go back and remove a couple because it just looked weird. I think my spider ends up with 6 eyes. I also added some plastic bits to create the little fangs for the spider's face. And because she has black eyes on black needle felting, it was hard to see them. So I decided to add these little fake shine marks with some white paint, and now I feel like her eyes are much more visible. I have this pack of small miniature items that were sent to me by Billy, thank you Billy, and I thought some of them would be really great for the vanity scene. They can be repurposed and repainted and reused, which always makes me so happy. I think they might be maybe LOL pieces, I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's a collection of all sorts of different toy pieces, but some of them do have some nice 12th scale items in them. I'm gluing each one of the plastic pieces onto a sewing pin and then sticking it into some foam. This is going to make it much easier to spray paint. I'm going to spray paint the base of it with a coat of brown. This is a special paint that adheres to plastic, so I know it's not going to scratch off. And then also some of these pieces I'm going to leave on the sewing pins because I want them to look like they are suspended in the spider web. While they were still stuck in the foam, I used that to my advantage to go ahead and paint on some details and do some dry brushing so the details would stand out. I added some of those little pearl necklaces into this, what looks like a vanity case, and glued things down with a hot glue gun. Now normally I would not use a hot glue gun for this type of detailed gluing, however I wasn't worried about little glue spider webs because there's going to be spider webs everywhere in a second anyway. I didn't put too much on the vanity because I want quite a bit of the pieces to be stuck in the web. I also added some foam board to the back of the vanity because I do plan to glue it in place and I didn't want it flat against the back of the wall. I wanted it to stand out just a little bit. So now I can glue it in, carefully making sure I get it right in the center. I got it a little off center, but that's okay. The glue will dry clear. Adding the items into the spider web were pretty simple. I just added some glue to the sewing pin, the sharp end, and then pushed it into the cardboard walls. They're pretty easy to get into place, and this is going to allow me to add the spider webs around them so it looks like they're floating, and hopefully the pins won't be too obvious. I also had this little green hat, which my patrons thought would be perfect to go on the spider, and I totally agreed, but it could not be a neon green, so I decided to cover it with some fabric, and I did this by first sanding the plastic piece and then adding some glue, carefully pressing around the edge. Then I could cut it free. I also added this little band around it. That's going to help keep the main shape of the hat. Once that was all dried in place, I could push the fabric up underneath the hat and glue that in place as well. And this did fit the spider's head pretty perfectly. It was like it was made for this project. And once I put it on the spider, I did age it a little bit so that it still had that rusty red look I was going with from before. So here's how the spider is looking. I went ahead and glued her to the stool because otherwise the needle felting just kind of wobbles around. It doesn't sit very flat. And then I started adding some of the items into her hands. So I had kept some from not hanging on the wall so it looks like she's in the middle of getting ready. So here she is with her hat. I don't know why she's brushing her hair while she's got a hat on, but maybe she's just going through the motions. She's frazzled. She doesn't know what she's doing. I also decided on the back, this was before I had put anything onto the walls, I wanted to add a little danger sign. And here's a little bit of sounds from the studio in case you're wondering what it sounds like when I'm by myself. So that's what is normally going on. I added the stencil to the back and I got my airbrush out and I still had that red from the vanity, which I think is going to be the perfect color to let everyone know there's danger. In my mind, I'm thinking this could have been an old crate, maybe an old crate full of some kind of something dangerous, I don't know. And the spider just thought, hey, I like that color, it matches me, I'm gonna be making my little me space inside of this crate. I added the purse and the record player to the floor, just kind of giving a little bit more story to the space that maybe the spider's getting ready for a date, got her purse next to the window. And now it's time for the spider serum. Veronica had sent these to me and I'm so excited to try them out. It comes with the actual spider serum and the cleaner to help keep the airbrush clean and unclogged. And so my biggest mistake here, which you will see immediately, is that I had the fan on in the room. Now I live in Texas and we just always have the ceiling fan on, so it did not even, I don't know why it didn't dawn on me that that was the problem. But this is how it looked after I did the first layer. It didn't quite make the spider web that I wanted inside my project. Instead, it made it all over my lights, my boom arm, and my microphone. So anyway, note to self, turn your ceiling fan off if you're doing this. Because I wanted just a really heavy web on the left side, I decided to grab some of the Halloween decoration webs I had from before and carefully drape them over the pieces that I had hanging from the walls and then down over the vanity. I think if I had done this first, the spider serum really would have caked onto the web and it could have had a whole different effect, but I didn't realize it needs something to grab onto, and I just didn't give it enough to grab onto, I think. So then I could put the spider in place. I realized she couldn't see the mirror at all, so I made a little hole in the web, and here she is. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, but you'll have to let me know what you think in the comments. So that's all I have for you. Stay tuned for next week's video where I will talk about the Dallas Miniature Showcase, go over a little bit on how I prepared for it, and show you how I put together the 1930s kitchen room box. And hopefully I will also have a special announcement about a project that myself and another artist have been working on for quite a while now. I'm very excited to announce it and talk to you about it. So there's lots coming up very soon. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Watch out for spiders, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Okay. Boom. Stand in the middle. And I am going to just knock things over. I wore my Where's Waldo shirt, as y'all called it in my taking a break video, because I have been found. I am back. Thank y'all so much for giving me the time to take a break. I'm so excited to get back into everything. Yeah, it should be Beetle Gust soon, so here we go. Woohoo!